Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for this possibility to present in this exciting conference on AI opacity. Thank you for the organizers for inviting me. So the topic of the conference, I find it very, very interesting. For a while, I've been thinking about the concept of opacity. What does it mean in the context of AI? And do we really need to be concerned about the fact that AI is opaque? Or maybe in some cases, it's not a problem at all because we often don't understand new technologies. And if it is a problem in certain context, what we can do about it? So I believe at least some of these questions will be addressed in this conference. My sincere apologies for not being able to join this event in person or at least in live online. I was really looking forward to participating in at least live and also listening to other presentations. But due to unexpected circumstances, I had to pre-record this presentation. In any case, I hope to listen to at least some of your presentations later on. This will be recorded, and I might approach some of the presenters by email later. And as well as I would like to invite everyone, if you're interested in what I've been talking about, please feel to approach me anytime by email and we can continue this interesting conversation. Let me share my slides and start the presentation. Hold with me. Just trying to find them. Here they're coming, just one more second. Great, I hope you can see them and they should appear in a full screen in 1 second. Okay, so my topic today is transparent and explainable AI in healthcare. Do we need it and can we have it? So essentially, when we think about AI opacity, one of the main ideas that I want to kind of start with is that the AI opacity problem is different depending on the context. So we have to look into AI opacity in context. In some situations where the AI applications may be of lower risk or of less direct impact on our lives, the fact that AI is opaque might be not a problem at all. If you think about some AI in some, maybe AI used to allocate resources in some manufacturing process, maybe you don't really want to understand how exactly AI functions as far as it is accurate and provides the required result. But when we think about AI applied in high-risk sectors, such as law enforcement, public administration, or healthcare sector, then opacity becomes really a problem. Because we want to know, or at least we want to know that the experts of AI really understand how those AI algorithms functions in order to prevent any possible errors and harms that these errors might lead to. So that's why, while I'm generally interested in AI opacity, in this presentation, I will be talking about opacity in health. And so I will, in my presentation, there'll be 3 parts. First, I will discuss how we can define and delineate two concepts of AI explainability and AI transparency that are supposed to address AI opacity problem. And then ask AI explainability in healthcare, do we need it? And what about AI transparency? Can we have it? So this presentation is based on our current research project that's called Towards Transparent and Explainable AI in Healthcare. And as a part of that project, we've carried 2 pilot focus group discussions and an analysis of interdisciplinary literature on this topic. And we've prepared 2 papers, which results I'll be summarizing in this presentation. So let's start then with the first part of the presentation. And I suppose whenever we talk with any stakeholders on this question, do we need AI especially let's say in healthcare, to be explainable and transparent, they would always first ask, what do we mean by transparency and explainability? And that's exactly what we need to first decide. Because as we know, there is no agreed definition in literature or in policy documents what these two concepts mean. And in some contexts, transparency and explainability are used as synonyms and interchangeably. Now, in other contexts, they are used as two different terms, and they defined differently in different documents and literature. So if we just take a look at two examples, so we've done actually quite a extensive review of how these terms used in different documents. But here, let's say if we look at World Health Organization's guidance on AI and European Commission ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, we already see how differently they're defined. So European Commission, so for instance, World Health Organization, they provide quite general and relatively vague concepts that focus on the purpose. So they say that the technology should be explainable to the extent possible, and depending on the persons to whom they are directed, while European Commission very clearly says that explainability is about technical explanation, essentially, about how decisions are made by AI. Now, World Health Organization defines transparency again by looking into its function. So they say that you should provide information about AI in order to facilitate meaningful public consultation about AI in healthcare, while the European Commission talks about transparency in terms of what type of information should be provided, and it refers to the data, the system, and the business models that should be explained to certain stakeholder groups in order to kind of decrease opacity. So after doing a bit of comparison, we've come up with our proposed working definitions of these two concepts that we'll be using in the forthcoming research. So when we talk about AI explainability, we use it in a narrow sense, and we talk about a technical explanation of how AI system functions, how it generates its outputs. And we have in mind normally the so-called XAI or explainable AI techniques that have been developed by computer scientists to explain normally unexplainable complex AI modules based on machine learning and neural networks and other complex AI algorithms. Now, when we talk about AI transparency, we then look at not from functionality perspective, but rather from kind of extrinsic perspective. And we define it as a requirement to provide information about the model, namely about the algorithm, its parameters, about data, meaning training data, about validation and testing of it, and about how and for what purposes it's being used, or business model. So these are the definitions that we're using in our research. So now our next question is, as far as opacity in healthcare is concerned, do we really want AI in healthcare to be explainable? That is, do we want technical explanations of AI enabled medical devices and or their outputs? So we've looked at literature, and there's a lot of literature that argues that AI medical devices should be explainable. That is, when, let's say, a clinician uses a device, they want to see an explanation how device has generated that particular one output. And there have been three main reasons, or at least we summarized the variety of reasons into three main blocks for this particular argument. So first, it has been argued that clinicians and patients need AI, let's say, outputs of AI medical devices to be explainable, like with a technical explanation, because that would enable them to trust. And if they don't understand how the technology functions, neither clinicians nor patients will trust the technology. The second argument that has been proposed is that explainability is needed in order to ensure quality and safety. So if we don't understand essentially how AI medical devices function, then we can't ensure that they will be safe to use. And the third argument proposed essentially in the literature is that we need AI technical explainability in order to more clearly allocate accountability and liability of different stakeholders. So the argument goes that, let's say, if a clinician does not understand how technology that they're using functions, they can't be made liable for mistakes caused by that technology. And as well, this also similarly might apply to manufacturers of AI if they do not understand and thus cannot predict exactly how the technology will behave in particular situations or what outputs it will produce. They also cannot be held at fault for any errors. Now, we looked at these arguments and we actually would like to challenge all of them. So first of all, as far as stress is concerned, we found that XAI techniques, if they are implemented in AI medical devices, do not necessarily lead to trust in healthcare AI. There have been a number of empirical studies, and also our pilot focus group discussions has shown that clinicians, even when they have access to those explanations of outputs generated by AI, at least currently, these explanations are not very helpful. So, for instance, explanations are often provided using so-called heat maps, where certain areas of an image are flagged to show which areas have been taken by the algorithm into account when making a particular decision. However, these heat maps don't demonstrate why these particular areas have been flagged or highlighted. And it means clinicians can't understand exactly why algorithm took certain factors into account, and this can't really decide whether they are correct ones and whether the outcome is correct. And also other research has shown that if algorithms are accurate and of high quality, explainability might help to further improve trust. But actually, if the algorithms are not entirely accurate, then explainability would actually further decrease trust in such AI, so to say, such devices based on algorithms. Now, secondly, we also found that explainable AI does not necessarily ensure quality of AI. So on the one hand, if explainable AI techniques are used by AI developers as a part of the AI development process, we found that in those situations, explainable AI techniques might be helpful to better understand how AI algorithm functions, identify errors, and possibly eliminate them as a part of development process. However, as far as clinical decision-making and quality of clinical decision-making is concerned, the clinicians have told us that current explainability techniques are not helpful for them to make a correct decision, because, as mentioned already before, they do not provide sufficient information, and also explainable AI techniques are currently themselves are not very accurate and reliable, and therefore cannot be really trusted in when deciding whether to rely on AI provided outcome or not. And the third conclusion that we made also is that explainable AI is also of little help when determining liability. So if in case of, let's say, medical negligence case against a clinician who used AI that caused harm, the court would assess whether clinician took all reasonable steps to prevent harm, whether they properly discharged their duty of care. And the court would not really care whether there was an explainability function or not, and whether the doctor fully understood how that particular, let's say, AI recommendation was generated. Doctors have always, or have traditionally relied on technologies that they do not fully understand, and that has not prevented from establishing liability of doctors in certain cases when they haven't acted reasonably, when they haven't taken reasonable steps to prevent possible harm. So it does not really directly and very strongly affect the establishment of liability of the clinician. In addition to that, we suggest that integration of explainability function into a medical device actually can shift the liability from the manufacturer to the clinician in case the device is defective. So, for instance, if the explainability technique, this explanation, provides certain indications that the decision generated by AI is not correct, and if the doctor misses that, maybe he doesn't really understand those complex charts provided, during using that explanation technique, or they simply misreads it, they might actually be liable for not properly discharging their duty of care. That is not taking into account that signal that the decision is incorrect and still relying on it. Now, on the other hand, the manufacturer, if they were, let's say, sued for this false decision or for defective software, for defective AI model, they could argue that this explainability techniques and this additional quality assurance measure that kind of is supposed to signal for clinicians possible errors, and that it's up to clinicians then to take them into account, and AI manufacturer then is not liable for any errors that let's say occurs. So overall, our conclusion is that AI explainability does not need to be, at least at the moment, required in healthcare sector. So we should not set a requirement for all AI medical devices to be technical explainable, because explainability does not really serve the expected goals as well as it could. So our next question would be then about AI transparency. So do we need it, and can we have it? And of course, all stakeholders agree that they need to understand a bit more about how AI enabled medical devices function, how have they been developed and validated, and whether they're fit for purpose. And we started developing a taxonomy of AI transparency need as a first step. And we've identified 6 categories of stakeholders, which you can see in the first column, which is patients, clinicians, hospitals, court participants, regulators, and public interest organizations. The latter includes NGOs, community organizations, and researchers. And then we identified different types of information that they might be interested in for legitimate purposes, and analyzed which sort of information which stakeholder would need. As you can see from the table, different stakeholders would, of course, need different type of information and different detail, or depending, of course, on their goals and on their understanding of the technology. So let's say patients would need only very general information, such as intended use, directions for use, benefits and material risks of, let's say, particular AI technology, while the stakeholders at the bottom of the table, such as court participants, regulators, public interest organizations, would need not only general, but also very specific technical information about the algorithm, about how its architecture, parameters and weights, training data, detailed training kind of information about training and validation, as well as clinical trials if they are available. So we argue that instead of technical explainability of decisions, different stakeholders would need rather more transparency around different parts of development and validation of the algorithm. And this has been also confirmed through our pilot focus group discussions. Now, the next question that we ask, can we really have the expected transparency level, the transparency that all stakeholders would want? And one of the main problems that have been pointed out in the literature, but hasn't been so far very in detail analyzed, is trade secrets. To which extent trade secrets prevent access to the information that stakeholders would want? Now, we've now looked at these different types of information that we identified and found that part of it would not be protected by trade secrets, such as, of course, general information about intended use of the device or benefits and material risks of the device. But a lot of information would be protected by trade secrets because of their commercial nature, such as detailed information about the algorithm, source code, training data sets, detailed verification and validation data, as well as detailed clinical testing information. Now, having found that that certain information that stakeholders would want to access is protected by trade secrets, we've also found that in some cases it means there would be a conflict between AI transparency needs and trade secret protection. That is like the needs of users of AI and the needs of owners or like legitimate interests of the owners of the rights. And the actual conflict situations, we distinguish 3 of them. So we suggest that there is an actual conflict between between trade secrets and AI transparency needs by clinicians, by healthcare organizations, and by public interest organizations. So clinicians, for instance, healthcare organizations, they're likely to want some information about maybe algorithmic parameters, maybe some training about validation outcomes, which might be of commercial, actually are of commercial value and might be kept secret. Public interest organizations, such as, let's say, health, like patient representing organizations and researchers who might have very deep expertise in, let's say, AI technology, and they might want to double check, in addition, let's say, to regulatory authorities, the quality or safety and so on of technologies. They might want actually to all technical information that, let's say, regulatory authorities get access to in order to do their own assessment. And such data, of course, or such information, of course, would be protected by trade secrets, and thus there would be a conflict between trade secret and, on the one hand, and AI transparency needs by public interest organizations. Now, our last step, and that's my last slide, is to analyze the current ways to address the conflict. So we've started conducting now this analysis, and our preliminary conclusion is that the current ways to address the conflict between AI transparency need as far as healthcare AI is concerned, and trade secrets, on the other hand, the current ways are not sufficient. So we've identified 4 of them. So first of all, we've been looking into trade secret limitations, such as public interest defense that's available under many laws. And essentially, it suggests that if a person discloses confidential information or trade secret to a third party, they might rely, in some cases, on so-called public interest defense if that information is, of public interest. However, in our case, situation is clearly inadequate because neither, let's say, clinicians or hospitals or public interest organizations normally do not have access to that information in the first place, so they cannot disclose that information and then rely on defense. And this defense does not create any active right for them to request that information to which they need access, but they don't have access to. Now, contracts is another way that can address this problem to some extent, especially as far as hospitals and clinicians are concerned. So hospitals or healthcare organizations, when they purchase AI technology, they can negotiate as a part during contractual negotiations, so an access to certain information that they need to check and ensure the quality, safety of the devices, and also they can negotiate provisions that would allow access to that information by clinicians and even by their patients. The problem is that since the technology is so new, stakeholders often don't know yet what information they need and will need when they start using that technology, and what might exactly go wrong. And then afterwards, what will be the process essentially of fixing that? So already at the moment, there have been cases where AI has been procured by public government institutions, and they had a chance during procurement process to negotiate access to certain information for transparency needs. But they haven't done that because they didn't know that later they will need that information. That, for instance, public will require certain information which they then cannot provide because it's protected by trade secrets and they don't have access to. The third path to try to address this conflict between trade secrets and AI transparency is freedom of information legislation that allows any organizations or individuals approach public institutions such as, let's say, regulatory authorities that approve medical devices to get some information about the AI medical devices. However, the main hindrance, of course, is that legislation itself protects trade secrets, and that preference is often given to trade secrets, and that through these requests, organizations only can access information that's not protected by trade secrets. And finally, the fourth pathway is this medical device regulation, this specific regulation that sets certain duties to the manufacturers and sponsors of, let's say, of AI medical devices to disclose certain information to the public in order to increase transparency. Now, this topic it still needs further analysis whether the current requirements let's say, related to labeling of AI medical devices are adequate to satisfy the AI transparency needs by different stakeholders. So I'll finish here, and in summary, I had here three conclusions. One, first, we believe that the technical explainability in AI is currently not the most efficient way to address challenges posed by medical AI, and that's why we don't necessarily need to focus on demanding the technical explainability of the AI medical devices. Now, on the other hand, AI transparency is certainly needed by different stakeholders to a different extent. And trade secrets have a potential to conflict with these legitimate transparency needs. And the current frameworks are not adequate to address the conflict. And we need to think of additional solution, how we can ensure sufficient transparency around medical AI despite despite or also respecting trade secrets, proprietary interest of trade secret owners. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, I would be very happy to discuss with you via email or even organize some time some online meeting. You can find some of my papers on AI explainability and trade secrets in this slide. And as said, I would be happy for any questions sometime later. Thank you.